I think that's one of the biggest fears that some sales engineers have transitioning into sales. I'll share a story of mine.
Mhm.
Back in 2006, my sales guy got promoted to a director role, and I took over being a salesperson for him for a short period of time. And I just hated every second. Like, I didn't mind working with the customers.
Mhm.
Working with the customers was fine. It's just he had that mentality of just hustle, 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 close, 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 ask for the PO. And they asked me to ask for a PO like 5 times, but we haven't even done a discovery.
Yes, I know.
I don't know if I saw, like, what am I asking for right now? I'm asking for blind faith, and it's a 100, 200, 300K deal. Would you do that? Like,
No.
you're basically selling a promissory note.
Well, I mean, the first chapter of my book is titled "What Human Being Acts This Way," and that's really true. I mean, I had a very successful sales career, sold hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment and services to companies all around the world. And I did it this way. I talk about in my book. I didn't do it by being, in fact, I have a story early on in the book about how I went to my first sales training class for my first job out of college. That's when I asked that question after watching the behavior of the classmates and watching the instructional videos. It's like, seriously, who acts this way? And sure, there are people that, obviously lots of people that do, and I've seen them throughout my career. I'll tell you, the people I know who have been most successful, the companies I've worked with, the individuals I've worked with, that are most successful, don't sell out, they sell in, as I describe in the book. And they do it in a way, they have their goals, they hit their goals, they're high achievers, but they do it by acting in a way that's aligned, A, with who they are as human beings, and B, as aligned with what the buyer needs from them.
So I've transitioned recently from sales engineering into sales. I mentioned earlier, it wasn't by choice, it was just circumstance, and
Right.
it's happened. And I realized I'm a better salesperson because I continue to act as a sales engineer.
Mhm.
Ben sends a quote.
Right.
Like, we solved your problem. All this is done. I'm just sending you, I'm doing the extra step of sending you a quote. And I found customers enjoyed that aspect of it.
Sure.
Right?
Well, think about what customers want. So when a company decides they want to buy a product, right? They need it. We have a need. We're going to go investigate. We're going to assign a certain number of people to this task, depending on the size of the organization and so on. What do they want? Well, I'll tell you what they want. What they want is very simple. They want to quickly gather and make sense of the information they need to make an informed decision with the least possible investment of their time and attention. That's what buyers want. And think about who's involved in making a decision to buy a product outside of procurement. It's doing the details, but the functional workers they've got a real job to do. They're not getting paid to buy a product. So what do they want to do with this thing that's on their checklist? They want to get it off the checklist as soon as they possibly can. Now, it takes a certain amount of work, takes a certain amount of effort, but what they want sellers to do is to help them achieve that goal, quickly gather information, make sense of it, make an informed decision, move on. And so as a salesperson and sales engineers, that's a significant part of your job. How do I help them do that? So if you're interacting with your buyers and you're not being intentional about, is this interaction, as a result of this interaction, at the end of it, is the buyer going to be somewhat closer to making a decision than they were before the interaction? If the answer is they're not going to be any closer to making a decision after the interaction, then why are you doing it? What's the value you provided to the buyer?
It's a service to me versus a service to them.
Exactly. You did nothing.
Yeah.
And yet this is very common. Typical example in sales is the check-in call. Hey, I haven't talked to you in 2 weeks. Just want to check in, see how things are going. Why would you do that? No value for the buyer. You just consume some of their time and attention for what? So there's other ways to structure that call that could have value, but that's not one of them.
So how would you structure that call?
Well, one of the ways to do it is, a simple example that I have used for a long time is I like to, when I've got prospects, I like to set up Google alerts so I can be sort of notified of anything that's happening with them. And so maybe and also just not the company, but the, sort of the buying process they're in, the type of industry they're in, so on. So yeah, I'll get a white paper, I'll get a PDF, I'll get a download, a link to something, and send it to the buyer. Hey, Jane, I was just thinking about you this morning when I was reading this article. There's two things in here I think we should discuss. Are you free next Tuesday at 9 a.m.?
Right. So, okay, I see a lot of people do that, but they make the mistake of just, oh, I thought of you while reading this article and I want to share it with you, which just provides more work. But you have a call to action.
Call to action in it.
There's actually something that you can help them with.
And it's got to be real.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just an excuse. It's got to be real, because part of your job is when you're doing outreach is in essence, you're sort of training, if you will, or educating the buyer about the fact that they have a choice about where they spend their time and attention. And you're training them to the fact that what you send them has value for them.
Right.
It does. And so they'll open what you send them. But if you train them, there is no value in what you send them, then they're not going to open it.
Filter.
It's this whole idea of you have to be intentional about what you do. And too often sellers and sales engineers to some degree is, they just do these throwaway calls because they sort of think they should, instead of being intentional about saying, well, what really does the buyer need from me right now to help them move closer to making a decision? What is that? And now the salesperson on the account should know that for every single qualified opportunity that they're working on. What is that next step? What does that next step need to be? But too frequently, they don't really know that. And they're sort of bullying forward.
Yeah.
That's again, there's this basic bargain that we strike with potential clients and customers as salespeople. And that bargain is they're going to invest some of their time and attention in me. I'm going to give them something of value in return. So they earn a return on that investment they made. And you have to think about it that way. If I'm sending a piece of content that I'm asking them to consume, how is that piece of content going to help them move closer to making a decision? How does it turn into a valuable use of their time and attention? And it's not from your perspective as a seller. You have to understand from their perspective. Why would that be why would that be valuable for them?
So, well, when you started talking about like sharing that like article or whatever, I was started thinking like you're just giving them more work until you said like there's a couple of things that we need to discuss and you highlight them and then say like let's talk about this. You basically summarized whatever that big article is and said we need to talk about these couple of things, which made a difference. And also, if you really want to, as a seller, you can just post that entire article on LinkedIn and say, look, this is interesting. And
well, sure. I mean, you could tag in the buyer if you want to.
You don't have to tag anybody. It might be interesting for other people as well.
Well, it could, sure. But I'm saying you're specifically trying to help this particular prospect, right?